Hello, you absolute legends. For the past week and a half, there has been an insane battle raging on Twitter. On the 9th of August, the gamer Riley CS posted a Battlefield 6 montage, and it's crazy. The aim is unbelievable. She quickly snaps back and forth between targets with the kind of ease and precision that is hard to take seriously. And at one point, she even snaps to a target that is hidden behind a giant rock. This gameplay has all the hallmarks of cheating: inhuman quickness when switching targets, snapping to enemies outside of her field of view, and even locking onto enemies behind objects. This seems like it's obviously fake, and it didn't take long for this to blow up, with hugely followed content creators retweeting Riley's post, calling out the fact that it's blatant cheating. And when I say this montage blew up, I really mean it. It has almost 100 million views, and I can't recall a single cheating scandal that has had this much attention, period. What's interesting is that in spite of this obviously fake montage, Riley has a ton of support. In one corner you have the large content creators proclaiming that this is the most obvious example of cheating ever, and in the other corner you have a ton of professional gamers and highly skilled aimers saying that it's legit, and both corners have massive amounts of proponents. So not only does this seem to have garnered the most amount of attention out of any scandal I can recall, but it also appears to be the most divisive. And what's perplexing is that for all intents and purposes, Riley CS is a relative nobody, who appears to have just uploaded a montage of herself using an aimbot in unranked Battlefield 6 beta games, a game in which apparently over 300,000 other people have already been banned for cheating. So this really shouldn't even be a story, and yet here we are. Unfortunately, regardless of whether or not Riley CS is actually cheating, I immediately realized there is a lot of misinformation being spread. So I figured that if you're going to have such a strong opinion either way, it should be based on correct information. So today, we are going to debunk the biggest myths and misconceptions around this quote-unquote cheating scandal. I really hope you enjoy. Now legends, you could win this incredible one-of-a-kind gaming PC toaster that is being given away for free by today's sponsor, Signal RGB. Signal RGB syncs all of your RGB devices, whether it be your keyboard, LEDs, motherboard, fans, everything, into one beautiful light show that reacts to your gameplay. Just imagine, it's 1 AM on a weekend, you are gaming in total darkness except for your monitor and this epic, colorful display. It really is a gamer's dream. And you can download Signal RGB for free and potentially win this awesome gaming PC by using the link in the description. Signal RGB supports thousands of devices across over 100 brands. It's really easy to set up, and it will automatically detect all of your connected devices. And as I said before, Signal RGB has crafted this ridiculous gaming PC out of a real toaster, and they are giving it away for free. This is a fully functioning gaming PC that has really nice specs. I'm not gonna lie, I have entered the competition myself. I don't even know if I'm allowed to, but I did it anyway. This is one of the coolest giveaways I've seen. And if you want to win this masterpiece, just use my link in the description to enter and download Signal RGB for free. At the very least, your gaming setup will look cool as hell. Before going into the details, we have to be honest. These clips don't pass the smell test. To any reasonable observer, they appear to be fake. So I would not fault anyone for thinking that Riley is cheating. However, just because something appears to be fake to a reasonable observer, that doesn't mean it is. This isn't proof. As someone who has been in the speedrunning community for over 25 years, I can tell you from experience, there was a time that whenever a casual viewer watched a speedrun, they would say it's fake. The most famous example being Super Mario Bros., where the world record runs would get flooded with comments from people saying Mario should have been killed by a piranha plant. Nowadays, people are a lot more knowledgeable about speedruns, so this comes up a lot less often. But let me give you one more speedrunning example that might relate to this Riley CS situation. This is Suiji, playing Super Mario 64. He is the greatest SM64 speedrunner of all time, and this is the world record in the 120-star category. So we have the greatest player playing the greatest speedrun, and it takes him around 38 seconds to collect this star. Now watch this clip of a different person getting that same star. Not only does this look stupid and fake, but it's 17 seconds quicker. So the obvious question should be, if this is real, why doesn't this person have the world record? They are clearly a better player just based on this comparison. You can see how this thought process might seem a bit silly in this context. Obviously, the player who did this insane strategy, known as Gib, just grinded this star for a long time to get that one clip. And while they obviously have an incredible amount of skill, this one clip isn't indicative of how they would perform in a full game run, where you need to be consistent. And what's funny is that Gib doesn't even have a full game speedrun submitted. He specializes entirely on single star speedruns.
If I see somebody that's that good at FPS, why aren't you playing that? Why have you never played on any team? Why aren't you on like a Valorant team? Why aren't you playing professionally, competitively? Why isn't that happening?
If you think Riley's clips indicate that she is good at FPS, so good that she should be a professional player, then you don't understand what makes someone good at FPS. If these clips are legitimate, the only thing they demonstrate is that she has good aim. But how reliable is aim as a predictor of a person's overall skill in FPS? Well, luckily, we have a real-world experiment that tells us. In 2023, Red Bull hosted an event called Ready Check, which was a competition based solely around aim. Competitors played various scenarios which only measured their ability to aim with a mouse. They had 8 people who qualified, and they put them against 8 esports professionals, which were invited by Red Bull. You would think the esports pros would win easily. I mean, it's their profession, but the results might shock you. In every single round, the lowest scoring non-professional scored higher than the highest scoring professional. The best aimer out of the pros couldn't beat the worst aimer out of the amateurs. This was an in-person LAN event, so there was no chance for aimbots or hacks. The pros got stomped. So do pros just suck at aiming? If these other players are so good at aiming, why aren't they pro? Well, it's because there is a lot more to being a pro than just having good aim. You need to have excellent game awareness, problem-solving ability, good communication, leadership, teamwork, the ability to predict enemy behavior, the ability to handle pressure, being a likable person that people want to be on a team with, and many more skills that have nothing to do with aiming. And all of these skills take time to practice and develop. So while the pros might have a laundry list of around 10 things they need to excel at, an amateur who solely practices aim is going to be a better aimer. But this simply does not translate to overall gaming ability. The winner of Ready Check, Maddie, who is basically the undisputed GOAT of aiming, even admitted he just doesn't care about the other aspects of gameplay.
Before we get into this specific performance, tell me a bit about how you got into the aim training community and becoming even a coach at that.
I originally got into aim training to get good at Overwatch. I'm not gonna lie, I was hard stuck like Diamond Masters before I got into aim training, and I was like, I want to get better aim, and I want to get better at Overwatch, but the more I played aim training, the more I realized like I'm really good at this, and I don't want to really focus that much on getting better at Overwatch and other aspects of the game. I want to aim train.
Riley is someone who specializes in aiming. She has over 1,500 hours in the Kovacs Aim Trainer alone. She is on a team that specializes in aiming. If her aim is better than esports pros, that doesn't mean she could be a pro herself. There are no delusions of grandeur here. These clips are not supposed to show that Riley is amazing at FPS. In fact, just based on the gameplay itself, it's terrible. If you tried to play like this on a pro team, not only would you get kicked immediately, but the other team members should be insulted. In this clip, Riley clearly sees several opponents, and yet doesn't engage or take cover. She completely ignores them and runs right out into the open. This is because she doesn't care about playing well, or playing effectively, or even winning. She just wants to get a good clip. And it would look really cool if she ran out into the middle of these group of players and took them all out, like some kind of action hero, which she does. This is an entirely different style of play. Once inside the group of enemies, it basically just becomes a target switch scenario in an aim trainer, which aimers are experts at. But the only reason this would ever work is if the other players were complete scrubs and you got incredibly lucky. Obviously, in this case, the enemy wasn't paying attention, or they just suck. If you tried to do this against good players, you would get destroyed every time. In order to farm these clips, Riley has to intentionally ignore enemies, run out into the open, and pray she doesn't get spotted and killed while she attempts to chain a bunch of kills together by target switching. And indeed, even against scrubs, Riley gets killed way more often than not trying to get into these positions. These clips aren't indicative of what happens the vast majority of the time. These are highlights from hours of play. It's a selfish way of playing. And the only point is to grind for hours and hours to get a few good clips that would look cool in a montage. This is why the only thing these clips demonstrate is good aim. And Riley would fail at every other metric that makes a pro, at least based on these clips. When you watch a professional who is trying to play effectively and efficiently, it's completely different. They take cover. They don't just run out into the middle of a group of enemies. It's a lot more strategic, and most importantly, it's a lot more effective. And to be fair, I understand where a lot of people are coming from, and I understand the disdain for this kind of montage. If you believe that Riley is trying to prove that she is some kind of battlefield savant, that would be really pathetic and cringe. If you are under the impression that these clip montages are supposed to suggest that Riley is better than professionals, that would also be pathetic. But it's not the case. These montages are purely a form of artistic expression, and nothing more. They aren't supposed to suggest anything.
But when you have people that are perceptually very, very good players, but they're not entering competitions and they're not winning competitions, I generally assume that they're probably cheaters.
These clips do not suggest that Riley is good at FPS. They only demonstrate that she has good aim, and having really good aim is what happens when you specialize in having good aim. In fact, many people who are not professionals have far better aim than most pros, but at the end of the day, when it comes to competitive esports, that really doesn't mean much. It's the equivalent of a Taekwondo exhibition. Sure, it looks cool, and it takes a lot of skill, but try it in a real fight and you'll learn pretty quickly that flashy kicks just don't work against a competent opponent. And if anything, they will just get you into a world of trouble.
They snapped to a player through a wall and traced their movement through a wall. And the internet is coping so hard, they said, you know there's a mini-map, right? Yeah.
This is definitely the clip that has raised the most eyebrows. Riley flicks 90 degrees to the left and shoots at a rock, and then when she strafes around, an enemy is there. Tectone is correct that the code for this is a minimap, and indeed, a player is visible on the minimap in that location. So based on the minimap, it would make sense to snap to that direction.
They perfectly tracked their verticality, their horizontal degree, and traced them through unless they have x-ray vision, you can't see someone through a rock. You can't trace their movement through a rock.
Yeah, but like you've got to admit, I mean, we can clearly see what's sus about this, right? Is that he locks on to this player that's behind the wall.
It definitely appears sus. But what I don't understand is why people say that Riley locked onto an enemy she couldn't see through a wall and tracked them perfectly. This is an oxymoron. Not because it's impossible that Riley could be tracking someone through a wall, but because it's impossible to tell. If you can't see what is behind the rock, you cannot tell if anything is being locked onto, nor can you tell if anything is being tracked. You cannot have it both ways. If we try to do a forensic investigation into what Riley was possibly aiming at, we find there was no one there. This is where she snaps to, which is to the left of the C, and when she peeks to the corner, the enemies are all on the right. There is definitely a downed enemy in the direction Riley snapped to the left of the C, but not only can we not determine if the player was downed at that moment, but the verticality appears to be way off.
Here is where Riley was aiming, approximately around here. And if we go in that straight line, where do we end up? We end up right here. And if you look, this is around the area that enemy 4 died.
If Riley did snap to this downed enemy, she seems to be aiming way too high. Even when Riley peeks out from the rock, she isn't locked onto anybody, and the closest enemy to her crosshair was moving, so we don't really know exactly where he was. The fact that an enemy was close to the crosshair when Riley peeked makes it seem like she was locked on the entire time, but unfortunately, we really have no way of knowing. At best, what we can say for certain is that she snapped to the direction of a player. We cannot say if anything was locked onto, and we cannot say if anything was tracked perfectly. This means it's up to you whether you think it's plausible that Riley could snap to that direction so well based on the enemy's location on the minimap. Personally, I don't find this to be that crazy. Riley turned to the direction of someone on the minimap, and there were a total of 4 enemies behind that rock. One here, one here, one here, and the 4th is the downed enemy on the left. So with 4 enemies behind that rock, it isn't shocking that her crosshair ended up in the general vicinity of one of them.
Snap to a rock, although I will say before, if you go back, I just want to break this down. They're on the radar right here at the bottom left. They're on the fucking radar, okay? So I understand why they snap there, but I feel like if you're shooting straight, you're looking there, you're not looking at the radar, so how they know exactly where to snap to is kind of crazy.
This is a reasonable thing to bring up. Is it really possible to simultaneously aim on an enemy this precisely and keep track of the minimap? Well, in this case, Riley didn't need to. Though you would never know this just based on the montage, because the edit cuts the clip right when she engages. But if you look at the original footage, the enemy that appears on the minimap is spotted and on the minimap for at least 8 seconds before the clip even starts. Riley knew the person was there well ahead of time. And in fact, she could see there were multiple people heading to that position. Snapping to that direction was completely logical here.
Is that right, Riley? Having a great gaming chair and good FPS can allow you to snap back 180 degrees and then trace an opponent through a wall for 8 shots before you realize, oh, your bullets aren't hitting, and then you go, oh, oopsie doodly. Yeah.
But if the enemy wasn't visible, why did Riley shoot? Well, it's because she was already shooting. The best clips are the ones where you don't stop shooting. You just switch from one target to the next and try to get as many kills as you can in a single magazine without stopping. It's basically spray and pray. In this case, the rock is more than anything a red herring. It was already a flick to an enemy completely off screen, so the rock was inconsequential. Clip farmers do not check to see if their aim is perfect before shooting. They shoot first and hope they hit something. 9 times out of 10, they don't, or they die trying. But of course, you'll never see those clips uploaded to Twitter. We also never see this type of instant snapping to enemies through walls in any other clips, and no one has been able to produce another example of this happening, despite Riley streaming many hours every day. I would posit that if this instant snapping to enemies through walls was a feature of an aimbot, you would see it happen at least one more time. I haven't seen an explanation as to why it only happens a single time in this entire montage or in any stream. Even the people who seem to be the most interested in proving Riley cheated disagree on how she did it. The channel Call of Shame, who seems to be very knowledgeable on aimbots, and to be honest a lot more knowledgeable than most people I see talking on this matter, claims that the snap to the rock was not cheating at all, and that the aimbot is only activated when Riley shoots and the target is within a certain field of view.
The aimbot didn't get a lock. Let me explain why this happened. The aimbot only works if the enemy is inside its field of view. Now, because the enemy was outside the FOV, it didn't lock on, even though he is firing his weapon. The snapping isn't the cheat. The aimbot only takes over once the weapon fires. In this clip, watch the first 5 bullets. They all miss completely, because the enemy is strafing left and the aimbot's field of view isn't on the target. That forces Riley to miss his shots. On the 6th shot, the target moves into the field of view, and that's when the aimbot's micro-adjustment takes over. I mean, it doesn't get any more blatant than this. If you can't see aimbot by now, then you are deliberately lying to yourself.
In that last clip, he shows the aimbot supposedly working. But when I view the actual footage and examine the next enemies in the exact same clip, the aimbot seems to behave differently. Riley is shooting here, and the enemy is within the field of view, but the crosshair drifts off target. So either she is toggling the aimbot between enemies, or this analysis seems to be cherry-picked. Call of Shame has also said this particular clip is both not cheating and also obviously cheated. Here he shows the aimbot supposedly working in this clip, which is the first clip in Riley's montage, but previously he had said the exact same clip wasn't cheating, and was inserted into the montage to give defenders plausible deniability.
Breaking down the first part of this montage, you'll see he's snapping all over the place. At first glance, this creates the illusion that he's cheating. I mean, you'd think that, right? When you slow it down, you can see that this person is actually snapping past the targets and correcting their own bad aim. They're snapping to nothing. And no, that's not cheating. Cheaters often include clips like this in their montages so that absolute morons can try to break it down and say, "See, he's not cheating."
Pointing out contradictions isn't proof that Riley isn't cheating, and Call of Shame could be correct that Riley is using a sophisticated aimbot of some kind. Apparently he is working on software to detect aimbots in Battlefield 6, which I'm very interested to see. However, at best, this just highlights that people's opinions are changing from day to day, and at worst, it shows that people are making claims too quickly without adequate investigation. If even the cheating experts don't agree on what cheat is being used, or which parts of the clips are cheated, we obviously have issues. People also pointed out that after the rock flick, Riley's crosshair jumps extremely quickly. But again, it has also been mixed in with misinformation.
And once they get this kill, it snaps again. Right to that guy right there. You guys see that little snappage?
For example, many people claim this snap is locking onto an enemy, when it clearly jumps to nothing. I have seen technical explanations as to how this can happen, and apparently players can do it at will. If the snap went to an enemy, I think it would be a lot more dubious than it is. But given that it didn't, and the phenomenon is reproducible, I don't see how this is any proof of cheating. Another clip that was seen as proof of cheating was this clip in Battlefield 5, where Riley flicks to players who appear to be invisible due to smoke.
Yeah, this isn't a hack. Somehow Riley knew in that smoke that there was someone in it and they were laying down. You can't see it, but Riley's God-given transcenses that transcend being human. At this point, it's a huge LARP hiding behind the queer community. We're watching someone literally use cheats and hacks and go, "No, I'm not. No, I'm not. You're a transphobe."
And when I viewed this clip on Twitter, it made no sense to me. The best excuse I had heard was that sometimes people get lucky, and I can understand why this would also cause a lot of people to think Riley is cheating. However, the real explanation is far more simple. When I view this clip on Twitter, I can't see an enemy here, but the Twitter version is terrible quality and highly compressed. Luckily, Riley still has the original video in high quality and sent it to me, and when I view the original, the enemy is clearly visible. And when you see the enemy, you realize the flick wasn't even accurate, and it took multiple shots before Riley adjusted. So when viewing the actual footage, you see that not only can you see the enemy clearly, but the snap was completely off target. Both narratives surrounding this clip are simply untrue. In truth, the fact that so much of this debate has been happening on Twitter is probably causing way more problems than otherwise necessary. Twitter doesn't even offer frame advance on its videos, and the video quality is always far worse than reality. So a lot of the time, it's very hard to tell what happened. I've seen so many comments from people saying that Riley perfectly snaps onto enemies.
It's crazy, bro, because some parts look insane, like this one. It's perfect.
But when I view the footage myself and slow it down, that's almost never the case. There is usually an initial flick that misses the target, and then there is a micro adjustment. This has been the standard technique for switching targets for years.
The core technique involves a flick, a fast, explosive, snappy motion, usually performed with the forearm, that produces a straight line in the direction of the intended target. This rigid snap is followed immediately after by a microcorrection, a much more narrow and smoother adjustment to correct either the overflick or underflick distance away from the target. The microcorrection is followed by the target confirmation, a very brief, almost instantaneous check to see that you are on target and can take the shot. This is the foundation of static clicking, and it is what allowed Bardoz to reach such high accuracy thresholds.
In response to the fact that Riley usually misses her initial flick, people will say that you can insert inaccuracy into aimbots to mask their impact. The channel Lincoln Margeson shows a great example of an entirely automated aimbot that appears almost identical to a human playing, so this is certainly possible. Essentially, the argument is that Riley missing isn't evidence of not using an aimbot, because you can make an aimbot miss on purpose, or at the very least you can make it randomly target different parts of the enemy to vary its effect. Recently, the player Shimmy was exposed for using an aimbot because it consistently snapped to the same part of the enemy's body, and in his case the snap was very obvious, as was the inhuman tracking. In Riley's case, there doesn't appear to be any rhyme or rhythm to where the aimbot is targeting, and it often drifts off target completely. If it's true that aimbots are sophisticated enough to vary their targets and insert this amount of unpredictability, I would love to see Riley's play replicated. Ultimately, while it could be possible that Riley is using an aimbot, the evidence presented so far hasn't been strong enough to convince me of anything. I would never say she isn't cheating, that's always possible, but given how many misconceptions there are floating around, I don't trust much at this point in time. Riley has been streaming many hours each day and showing Task Manager upon request, so if she is using something, she is hiding it very well. There is also a ton of circumstantial evidence being thrown around, like the fact that Riley was banned on Twitch for 1 day, which could be due to being mass reported. On the flip side, Riley hasn't been banned in-game, which could be used as evidence that she isn't cheating, especially given that according to their anti-cheat team, they have already prevented over 300,000 attempts to cheat already. Riley has been banned in the past on Twitch, and the reason given by Twitch was due to cheating. This might be legitimate. Riley may have cheated in some way in some game in the past. Twitch doesn't provide any specific details, so it's up to you whether or not you believe that Twitch is an authority on cheating and if this ban affects your opinion on current events. I think the biggest determining factor on whether or not you think Riley is cheating will be based on whether or not you think this type of aim is possible. And personally, I can say that after looking into the aim community over the past few months, Riley's clips aren't that insane for someone who specializes in aim. And when you consider that these clips are just a 1-minute highlight reel of a stream that lasted hours and hours, it's not that shocking. Matty, the aimer who won Red Bull's Ready Check competition, who proved in a LAN event that his aim is far superior to esports pros, who is far and away the highest ranked aimer in the world, believes that these clips aren't anything out of the ordinary. When the best aimer in the world, and possibly of all time, believes that Riley isn't cheating, this should give you pause. Of course, this is an appeal to authority, and doesn't prove Riley isn't cheating, but it's a good indication that things might not be as clear-cut as they seem. The AIM community is relatively young, having only really developed in the past few years, so it's understandable that most people don't know much about it. And if it's anything like the speedrunning community, I know from experience that when a niche community doing crazy things suddenly gets massive amounts of mainstream attention, there's going to be a lot of people who simply don't believe it. And that's not only reasonable and understandable, it's to be expected. I won't say if Riley is cheating or not, I'll just say that I'm not convinced she is. What I do know with a high degree of certainty is that the loudest voices surrounding this drama seem to have massive gaps in their knowledge, and I predict in a few years, as the AIM community becomes more widely understood, we might look back at these clips and realize they really aren't anything special at all. Thank you so much for watching, you legends. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next video.